Good morning. I am Robert Hur, the United States Attorney here in Baltimore. I am very glad to be joined this morning by Baltimore Police Commissioner Michael Harrison, FBI Special Agent in Charge Jennifer Boone, ATF Special Agent in Charge Rob Hur, DEA Assistant Special Agent in Charge Don Hibbert, Tom McDaniel with the United States Marshals Service, and Nicole Harris-Crest of the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. We're also joined here this morning by Clint Fuchs, who serves in my office as an Assistant United States Attorney and is our Violent Crime and Gang Section Chief. We and the men and women of the law enforcement agencies that we represent are utterly dedicated to making our city safer for the people of Baltimore. I'm very grateful to the Reverend Alvin Hathaway of the Union Baptist Church for generously allowing us to address the city from his beautiful church. I'm even more thankful for the service and ministry that Reverend Hathaway and his team provide to the community. We're here today to talk about some recent and important advances in our efforts to reduce violent crime in the city of Baltimore. Today, I am announcing arrests and indictments in 4 separate federal investigations taken down in the last few weeks that target violent groups in the parts of our city that are most stricken by gun violence. Before I describe some of the specifics of these cases for you, a few things to note. The 4 federal cases you'll hear about this morning are just one part of our strategy to reduce violent crime. In addition to proactive cases like these, we also do our part to react to gun arrests in the city by working with the Baltimore Police Department, the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, and ATF to screen every gun arrest and determine which defendants should be prosecuted in federal court. We are also engaging in outreach, using tools such as public service announcements and community resource provider fairs, like the one going on today here at Union Baptist this morning, to help make sure that people do not end up in federal court or any court in the first place. In the 4 proactive cases you'll be hearing about this morning, all of which were taken down during the last several weeks, federal grand juries have indicted a total of 90 defendants. These investigations have taken a total of 51 guns off the streets of Baltimore, removed kilogram quantities of deadly drugs, including fentanyl, from our neighborhoods, and seized nearly $1 million in cash. These enforcement actions have removed violent offenders, guns, and drugs from all around our city, in East Baltimore, West Baltimore, Northwest Baltimore, and Southwest Baltimore. All of these cases are built through cooperation. These types of cases, proactive investigations focused on those neighborhoods in our city suffering from the most violence, simply do not happen without close partnership between Baltimore police officers, federal agents, and prosecutors. These results that we're going to talk about today are the fruit of months of painstaking investigative work. While it takes only the blink of an eye to take a life with a gun, it takes much longer to gather the evidence necessary to bring the people responsible to justice. Police officers, federal agents, and prosecutors have been building these cases together for months, and Baltimore can be confident that we are continuing to do this work together. Now let me talk a bit about each of the 4 federal cases that we've brought down here in Baltimore in the last few weeks. And you'll see the locations of the activity of each of these cases on the map to my right. First, the first federal indictment, returned the week before last, charges 25 members of an alleged drug trafficking organization on Monument Street in East Baltimore. The defendants charged in this case face federal charges for allegedly dealing drugs around the 400 block of North Montford Avenue and Jefferson Street, and around the 2400 block of Monument Street at Port Street. Today is the first public announcement of these federal charges. Beginning last year in July, these defendants allegedly distributed heroin, fentanyl, powder cocaine, and crack cocaine to individual drug users and in bulk quantities to other drug traffickers who resold the drugs in and around Baltimore. 10 of these defendants also face gun charges. During the investigation, law enforcement seized 9 guns, more than 14 kilograms of cocaine, about 4.5 kilograms of heroin, and 479 grams of fentanyl, which is enough to kill over 200,000 people. Law enforcement also seized more than $472,000 in cash in this investigation, as well as jewelry and vehicles worth almost $500,000. Second, also the week before last, another federal indictment charged 6 defendants for a drug distribution conspiracy allegedly operating in the area of Frederick and Collins Streets in southwest Baltimore. Today is the first public announcement of this investigation's takedown as well. In addition to drug charges, the lead defendant, named Jabril Ali, faces numerous federal gun charges. During this investigation, law enforcement seized 5 guns and 400 grams of fentanyl. If convicted, Mr. Ali faces a mandatory minimum of 10 years in federal prison and up to life in federal prison. His co-defendants face up to 20 or 40 years in federal prison. The third investigation resulted in 2 separate federal indictments, charging a total of 38 defendants for allegedly participating in 2 separate drug trafficking organizations to sell heroin, fentanyl, powder cocaine, and crack cocaine to drug users and resellers in and around the Edmondson Village neighborhood of southwest Baltimore. The second group of defendants, 16 of the 38, were charged several weeks ago on July 3rd. The defendants in this case used homes in and around Baltimore to process, cut, and package the drugs for sale. And these defendants, like the defendants in the other cases we're talking about today, possessed guns in furtherance of their drug dealing. Specifically, members of one of the drug trafficking organizations in this case distributed heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, and crack cocaine in Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And these defendants allegedly cut the heroin and crack that they sold with other substances like fentanyl. And at least 5 overdose deaths are attributed to the distribution of drugs by members of this conspiracy. Members of the other drug trafficking organization in this investigation allegedly used violence to retaliate against those seeking to rob or cheat them. The federal indictment details several of these violent acts, including a shooting murder on May 5th, 2018, and a gunfight on October 16, 2018, in which an unarmed bystander was struck in the crossfire. In this investigation, law enforcement seized 17 guns, ammunition, drugs, and more than $270,000 in drug proceeds. Fourth, and finally, the week before last, a 4th federal indictment charged 21 Baltimore men for allegedly operating a drug distribution operation in northwest Baltimore, distributing heroin, crack and powder cocaine, fentanyl, and marijuana in the area of Liberty Heights Avenue and Garrison Boulevard. Several of these defendants also face federal gun charges. Law enforcement seized 20 guns and more than $200,000 in cash during this investigation. These defendants are part of an organization called LNG, which is made up of 2 groups who work together: the Black Guerrilla Family, also known as BGF, and the Yellow Bus Gang Crips. LNG members allegedly committed acts of violence, including a gunfight on January 19th of this year. These 4 federal investigations I just described are examples of our proactive cases, ones in which we focus on regions of the city suffering from the most violence, identify those responsible for that violence, and build the evidence required for federal prosecutions, convictions, and sentences. But that is just one part of our strategy to drive down violent crime in our city. As I said earlier, we also team up with the Baltimore Police Department, the State's Attorney's Office, and ATF to screen every gun arrest in the city and identify those defendants whose criminal histories and links to violence warrant prosecution on federal gun charges in federal court. The prosecutors in my office are eager to do our part with these gun prosecutions. Indeed, my office charged 5 Baltimore City defendants on federal charges of illegal gun possession on Tuesday of this week. That's 5 charges, 5 defendants in Baltimore City on one day of this week. The message is, do not pick up a gun to settle a dispute. You do not want to be in federal court facing federal time. Finally, while it is important to hold accountable those who choose to bring gun violence and drugs to our neighborhoods, it's also important to help make sure that people make the right choices and steer clear of crimes that will land them in federal court. Now, this morning, Union Baptist Church isn't just hosting this press conference. Reverend Hathaway has generously allowed the U.S. Attorney's Office to hold a community resource fair here. Folks in my office have organized this event to bring resource and service providers into this community, including the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, the Center for Urban Families, and Healthy Lives. These folks do the hard work of giving everyone the tools to build lives that do not include guns or drugs. And without the dedication of these partners, events like the ones being held today would not be possible. Also, last week, I rolled out a series of public service announcements to play on radio stations throughout the city. The message is clear. Gun crime leads to federal time. And federal time is different. No suspended sentences, no parole, and federal prisons far from Baltimore. Our goal is a safer city with less violence, fewer guns, fewer victims, and fewer grieving families. So please put down the gun. In conclusion, I am very grateful for the hard work that led to the investigations and prosecutions you've heard about today. But all of us in law enforcement know that there is more work to be done. We're not going anywhere. We're here to stay, and we will keep doing this work together. We are all in this together. And the we in that statement includes not just law enforcement, but the entire city. All of us need to act together to stop the violence and hold accountable those who are using violence for their own selfish ends. I love the city of Baltimore, and I am proud to work with the men and women of law enforcement who work tirelessly every day to make our city safer. It is an honor every day to serve the people of this city, and there is no place I'd rather be, and no other job I'd rather have than to serve as United States Attorney here in Baltimore. The people of Baltimore want and deserve safe neighborhoods, and law enforcement at all levels, local, state, and federal, will continue to work together to reduce violent crime in our city. Thank you. You'll now hear from Police Commissioner Michael Harrison.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Hur. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your partnership. And good morning to all of you. A major part of my crime reduction strategy is to strengthen the coordination with our local, state, and federal partners. We're stronger together than we are alone, sharing intelligence and aggressively investigating cases involving drugs and violence in our community. To date, I am very glad to be here with all of our federal partners to discuss the results of our ongoing efforts to reduce violent crime in our city. Currently, the Baltimore Police Department members are assigned to all of our federal task forces focused on building strong prosecutable cases involving violent offenders. We're also using the analytical resources of our Watch Center as well as intelligence gathered from our investigations to identify members of criminal organizations. The goal, of course, is to impact high crime areas and to disrupt, dismantle, and eradicate areas of illegal drug activity with violence that often goes with it. I want to thank the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department and all of the members of all of our partner agencies for the great work on the cases we're talking about here today. Trust me when I tell you, you're making a difference. I'm proud to be a part of this talented team, and I'm looking forward to a lot more great work in the future. And I think our coordinated message to the Baltimore community is we're removing drugs from the streets, we're removing guns from the streets, and we're removing bad actors from the streets of Baltimore. And thank you again.
We'll take questions now, if you'd like.
I have a question.
Yes.
6 days ago, your boss called Baltimore a drug-infested mess. Have you shared with the president the results of your efforts here to drive down violent crime? Is he aware of the difference you've been making here?
Well, I am not certain if the president is personally aware of the results that we just talked about this morning. What I do know is that he should be aware of the fact that we know we have a lot of work to do here in the city, and we're resolved to keep doing it together as teams. And I really cannot emphasize enough how important the partnerships are between law enforcement and local, state, and federal levels. That's the message. I personally am focused on the violence here. I understand that is job one for the people of Baltimore, and that's what we're focused on morning, noon, and night.
And do you feel like you're a federal agency? Do you feel like you have full
Absolutely. Now, I have never yet met a U.S. attorney or a law enforcement official who says they're perfectly happy with the level of resources they have. We could always use more. We'd always like more. But what I do know is that we are receiving support, and we're applying that support in smart and supportive ways. I know I speak for the entire federal law enforcement community when we are resolved to be the best possible partners we can to local law enforcement, such as Commissioner Harrison and City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby.
Thank you.
Are any of these individuals recently indicted?
You know, again, I don't want to speak to specific details of their criminal histories because these cases are under indictment right now in terms of where they are in the criminal process. They've been charged, but they have not been convicted or tried or found guilty of their crimes. So I don't want to comment specifically on their criminal histories. What I will say is that when we are undertaking the process of identifying which parts of the city are we going to focus our proactive federal investigations on, and which particular groups of people do we identify as being repeat or drivers of violence, it's often the case, as you would expect, that these are people who have had numerous trips through the criminal justice system and have previously made choices to commit violence in our city.
How different is this most recent federal partnership than the partnerships you've had in the past with Baltimore City Police and other local agencies?
Well, I think we are fortunate here in the city of Baltimore that for a very long time, and this was certainly the case when Rod Rosenstein was U.S. Attorney, we had a real panoply of relationships built on trust and partnership and goodwill. We understand that there's plenty of work for everybody, and all of us need to be doing our part. We all need to be talking frequently. I really have the great pleasure of being in very frequent contact with Commissioner Harrison, as well as State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby. So this partnership model, it's what has worked in Baltimore before. It has worked in other jurisdictions around the country facing violent crime problems before, and it's what we're applying here, and we know we're going to get results.
I have a question for Commissioner Harrison. I know some of these takedowns are quite recent, but have you and your department, have you seen a change in taking these defendants off the streets and dismantling these drugs?
What I think we can say is I think we have, and there are members of communities who call us and tell us that they see the takedowns and they notice certain bad actors are no longer in place, either selling drugs or kind of occupying the community. And so we get a lot of communications in person from members of the community who are thankful and grateful for the work we're doing, especially when they see it. And it becomes apparently noticeable when those bad actors are not there terrorizing those neighborhoods. So I think we see a change, and it shows the uniformed patrol officers that there's work being done to make their lives and their work easier also. So we see a renewed focus from uniformed patrol, renewed focus from detectives and investigators assigned to our federal partnerships, and we see better communication from our community members who tell us they see what's happening, especially on days of takedowns. I think over time we all expect to see that as we become more impactful, being where we need to be, when we need to be, and engaging with whom we should be focused on, the bad actors who are committing the bulk of our violence. Over time we will see that, and it's days like today that send a strong message that if you choose this life, we will be here again reporting how we caught you. Well, that then brings into a conversation of deployment strategy. How do we now deploy resources, both uniform patrol strategies and community engagement strategies? And how do we now go into areas to build relationships with people where there could be some mistrust or they didn't think that we were doing anything about this? This is proof positive that we are doing something about it, and we do care, and we're working every day on it. And so we're always assessing every day how we assess, reassess, re-engage, redeploy, reallocate resources so that we can account for displacement and prevent and deter further crimes.
Is there a concern that with gun arrests being down, that this has been, I mean, that there will be fewer federal cases?
Question for me? We are proactively going after everybody who's selling drugs and committing violence in this city. And when we learn about it, we are investigating every single one of those crimes. And we will use the weight of the local, state, and federal government to make sure that we can prosecute, bring cases to bear, and prosecute those individuals who are terrorizing our city. Every time we learn about it and every time we know about it.
What is the follow-up? I mean, how do we make sure that there's not a suction and that more people just come up and start selling drugs again and not just repeat the cycle and we're out here arresting people again and again?
Well, that's part of the same answer I just gave. It's about assessing and reassessing and redeploying and figuring out the strategy of community engagement, a patrol strategy and design to make sure we can account for displacement so that it just doesn't move somewhere else, and how we utilize our resources and community engagement to know when up-and-coming drug dealers want to take over another neighborhood, how we can all utilize our resources with the help of the community to prevent that. Police, local, state, and federal law enforcement can't do this alone. It will be a coordinated effort with the community. What you see before you today is great communication, collaboration, and coordination at its finest.
Commissioner, have the President's comments created any tension or had any impact on any partnership you have with federal law enforcement?
It's only make us more resolved and stronger willed and more determined to do more of this every single day.
Can I have the U.S. Attorney answer that same question? Great question.
The last question was asked?
Yeah, that Mike.
There's been absolutely no impact. I've had a fabulous, really close partnership and relationship with Commissioner Harrison and with Ms. Mosby before the weekend. I have it now, and I'm confident that I will continue to have that because we really all understand it's simply common sense. We've got a lot of problems to solve, and the only way we're going to solve them is by working together.
And Mr. U.S. Attorney, can you talk about local and congressional support you have received on this topic of community engagement?
You know, I haven't spoken directly with local or congressional officials on this particular problem, but I have to understand that they are certainly just as concerned with the issues of violent crime affecting our city as we are, and we're confident that we have their support. Yes, we've had a number of very productive conversations with the governor's office and members of his staff, and one of the things that we've been in active discussions with is about the idea of having state funds being allocated for the purpose of funding what are called special assistant U.S. attorney positions. And these are prosecutors. In fact, we have two in our office right now from Ms. Mosby's office, the state's attorney's office, who are designated and made so-called special AUSAs in our office to prosecute and focus on things like gun crime or fentanyl crime. So to the extent that Governor Hogan supports that proposal in order to get state money to fund those further positions, we can always, as I alluded to before, we can always use more resources and more bandwidth because there's plenty of work to do. Thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate it.